So Randy and I go back a long freaking time, like 25 years or so. And of all, I tend to be pretty irreverent. And of all the people that I've known and worked with in this industry, Randy is one of the people I hold in the highest regard. He does amazing research and brings data. I just talk shit and spout opinions based on intuition and experience. And the nice thing about Randy and the bad thing about Randy is, oftentimes he's bringing like the hard shit to bear. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to dive into a bunch of data that Randy shares regularly on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And so we'll talk about how everybody can follow you. But if you're in this industry and you're not following Randy on social media and his blog, you're doing yourself a disservice. So Randy, you want to give us a little background?
Actually, I come out of the shopping center mall development industry, which I was in for many years. And somehow I stumbled in this industry 30 years ago when we were helping a client with a 6 shopping center, and he owned the bowling center. And one January, I think it was 8th, 1989, it burns to the ground. So I go down and visit Charlie a few days later. Charlie was an interesting character. He was 70 years old, 3rd grade education, smart as a whip, entrepreneur, like started the first wholesale grocery business in the Midwest and all. And I went down and saw Charlie, and Charlie says, Randy, I'm 70 years old, have a farm, enjoy coming to work at 10 in the morning, going home to feed the animals at 2. Will you handle rebuilding the bowling center? And as a good real estate developer, I just raised my hand and said yes. Went home and realized I hadn't bowled since I was 16 years old, which actually ended up being the best thing because I had no preconception about what it should be. To make a long story short, I go down and see Charlie and say, well, Charlie, who are your bowlers? He said, I know who the bowlers are. Beer guzzling blue collar workers. You got to remember, those were the days when people would sign up for league bowling to go every Tuesday at 5 p.m. for 32 friggin' weeks. Well, I said, Charlie, maybe we ought to do a little research. I finally convinced him. We sent out a 4-page questionnaire to his bowlers. Tabulate them. We get a 60% return with no incentives. We tabulate them. 51% of his bowlers were women, not men, and 75% were white collar, not blue collar. Well, those were the days when you wore a coat and tie to work. You went home, you put on the grubbies, and you went bowling, So to make a long story short, it was fast track construction, all kind of real challenges. But we upscaled the center. We did Art Deco. We got rid of all the settee seating. We went level. We put windows in. We took the $1 frozen hamburger, made hamburgers for $4. We reopened. We charged 35% more than anybody else in Kansas City, and we doubled his business. And it's a bottom lesson. Match the product to the business.
That's it right there.
Yeah. And that was kind of the beginning of the family entertainment center industry, if you remember Discovery Zone and all the stuff that was happening. Yeah. And my partner at the time and I said, this is a much more rewarding than going in to talk to the bankers to try to explain to them why their $60 million mortgage would be worth $30 million if they cooperated with our client on a real estate workout for 3 years and getting kicked out of the room, which we had happened several times. So that's how I stumbled in this industry. It was all because of a fire. Timing's everything.
The Phoenix. What a great story. And one of the things I keyed on there, you talked about going into it not knowing anything. And I've been doing some work around human-centered design as a means to do research for innovation in this industry, especially for millennials and Gen Zs, where the people that are in the power structure that are actually building these facilities are really disconnected with that audience. And one of the things we talk about is going into it with what they call beginner's mind, right?
Right. You got to be like an anthropologist. I can't tell you how many times I have to say to my clients,
"You are not the customer." I've said that a million times.
You are not.
And even if you're the same age, like even if you think you are the customer, you're not the customer because you're one person, right?
You're not.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you have a very diverse audience. And that's part of the problem I have with using the term millennials and everything, because it's a diversified customer base. It's not the age, it's more the lifestyle people are in, life stage that affects their behavior.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of things.
It's
life stage, it's mindset, it's upbringing, it's religion, it's culture. It's like it's a million things.
Right.
But the reason they do generational cohorts is because there are general common attributes across generations that they can find. But if you only use that, you're setting yourself up for failure, I would say. Yeah. And so the research that you do, like there are very few people I've been able to find that are really doing research on this market. And so like you do a lot of design and a lot of consulting for projects and people building facilities. The research, what drives you doing the research that you do? Because I know it's got to be time intensive. Do you?
Well, it's time intensive, but we live in a period of dramatic change. A seismic shift is occurring in consumers' behavior as well as the entertainment leisure landscape. And if you're building for a client, you got to know where things are going, not where they've been. Because if not, you're not going to have a future-proof product. And if you're just modeling over existing projects, many of those were conceived years ago. If a client comes to me today and says, I want to open an XYZ, it's going to be 2 years probably before we open it. So we're going to be in the future by the time we open, not in the present, not in the past. So you got to look at a lot of the macro trends as well as some micro trends to really see where things are shifting. And the pace of change is so fast today. I mean, we do a lot of work now with the restaurant industry because it's key to the food and beverage is becoming key to success. And I just think about trends like clean food. Who ever heard of clean food a year and a half ago? Now we have, Impossible Burgers, and they
the valuation of Impossible as a company is higher than the value of all the peas made in the world as a commodity, and that's what they make the peas out of.
I know, but it's just so it used to be when I got in this industry, things move slowly, but now it's overnight. It's because of the internet, because of social media, because of all kind of influences. So if you aren't looking into the future, you're not going to be successful. I think it was
what they say, 10th, where they're expecting 10,000 years of change this century versus the last century at last century's rate. So just exponential growth. And VR is a great example of that. Like I talk to companies all the time that are trying to plan big projects, like the big FEC projects using VR or immersive technology. And like you said, like they're planning it now, but they're not going to install it for 3 years. What technology do you spec? If you're going to roll it out in 3 years, like you're going to be 3 generations behind. And so, I try to help them connect the dots by pointing where some of the big technology trends are going, but really, really difficult in the VR space.
The way I explain it sometimes, it's like in 2 decades, we're experiencing what was the equivalent of 100 to 150 years in the Industrial Revolution.
Crazy. So, you talk about food and beverage, and let's start there, right? And I know you have you've provided some slides, and I might jump around a little bit, but I'm going to try to put these up here and get to the right ones. So bear with me, crowd. But you talk about
food and beverage is way at the back.
F&B in here, and of course it is
towards the back somewhere.
And one of the things that I've been talking to is a lot of FEC owners now are figuring that out and doing scratch kitchens and here it is, food and here we go, and doing scratch kitchens and family entertainment centers. And I talked to Dave Bishop, who did level 257 for Namco, and and they brought in a menu consultant to try to figure out what to do there. And we're starting to see in the VR space, VR World in New York, at least put a full service bar in. And they were one of the first ones I've seen. And it's now been key to their success, at least they feel so. So what are you seeing in food and beverage, and how should people be viewing it and using it on the operator side?
I put it very simply. If food and beverage is not 50% or more of your revenue, you're in trouble. Food and beverage drives attendance. This slide shows millennials consider food and beverage entertainment.
Wow. And it's I'm surprised at the ratio of food to drinks, because I would have thought that would have been way closer to equal. I'm shocked at that.
No, and there's a major movement now away from alcohol. We have low alcohol, we have non-alcohol, but it's about the adventure and discovery. Look, we did a check last year. There were 400 shows on television and the internet about food. I mean, it's the kids are watching it, so they want to experience these things, and you mentioned about the VR facility that putting a bar, the main reason people go out, and we've seen this across all industries, isn't necessary for the food and beverage, isn't necessary for the entertainment, it's for the socialization. And as humans, I've worked in 36 countries around the world. Basics. We cannot socialize unless we have a drink in our hand, we're eating something, or basically rolling or hitting a ball or doing something along those lines. We can't just sit and socialize. And one of the keys, if you have a VR facility, one of the keys to the social experience is the debriefing. Sitting around talking about what happened.
And this is something that I've been trying to get them to do around VR, because the VR, you can create these transformational experiences, right? And they can be shared experiences. So for example, going back to last week's webinar, Tommy was talking about they have a new ayahuasca experience, which just shown at the Tribeca Film Festival. And it's a shared experience. So you can have a dozen people sitting around in kind of a circle with a shaman virtually going through a 15-minute ayahuasca experience, right? And then what they're doing is they're creating a scene, a physical scene, and then curating a conversation afterwards. So you actually have someone there. It's like book club, right? You'd read a book and you talk about a book. So you can have these experiences and then talk about what do they mean to you and curate these social. I think there's a massive opportunity there that almost nobody is doing.
Yeah, and we have so much digital influence in our lives at home and everything. And actually what's happening is human contact is starting to become the new luxury. Face-to-face human contact. And if you look at a lot of the venues that are evolving, a lot of them have the word social in their name. Even Lucky Strike has now added social to a lot of their facilities. You got Punch Bowl Social. It's the social that drives it. We've seen studies in the museum industry and arts and everywhere, and the primary reason people go out is for the social experience. They just have to be facilitated.
Absolutely. It's funny. I'm a Monty Python fan, and there was in The Meaning of Life, there's a skit where this couple goes into heaven and they sit down at the restaurant and the waiter comes out and says, would you like a conversation starter? And giving them something to talk about, right? And they were, and it was philosophers. Okay, so like I think people, and as we move more into this kind of tweeting, Facebook, online social media, are we going to have to reteach people how to have conversations in real time and with people? And is that part of it? Is that coming down the future? Do you see?
I don't know. I get frustrated. A lot of my business relationships with our different people, all they want to do is email and text. And sometimes you just want to have a conversation. It's more fruitful. The slide you have up, I think, brings up a very important point about experiences today. Not only does it have to be social, it has to be shareable on social media. It has to be share worthy, because what's happening today is we have a phenomenon called conspicuous leisure. It's no longer conspicuous consumption about the logo on your shirt. It's about sharing experiences That's how people are building their social capital. They're building experiential CVs.
It's really interesting. So last night I was here in New Orleans and I stumbled upon, they opened the new Fillmore and the Foo Fighters were playing. It was a rescheduled concert from February. And I picked up a ticket and I went and even me, and I'm 55, right? So I'm kind of a bit of an old dog. But even then, during the event, I kept thinking about, how do I tell my friends about this? What picture should I take? What video clip should I make to share on social media? And it's fascinating how that's just been, it's become a mindset. Like, how do I share this with people?
Bob, it's become a major consideration in our design of facilities. Is it Instagrammable? Is the criteria. I mean, we're going out of our way to make sure if somebody's there and they want to share it.
I know restaurants that have been successful solely on designing the environment and the menu items, the presentation of the menu items to be Instagrammable, and that's their marketing budget. And they've been wildly successful. And so talk about what's the Museum of Ice Cream. Have you looked at those types of facilities?
Well, we have all these pop-ups occurring in the museum. Yeah, it's a new experience. Yeah. But, there's a problem here because this is killing repeat appeal of fixed facilities. It's just like the foodie culture, adventure and discovery. We're looking for new experiences. We're looking for new things to add to our experiential CVs. Repeat appeal of the classic family entertainment centers.
But some of that is the industry's fault, right? So back in the day, and you remember this, the arcade, we used to call operators furniture movers, right? Because they had flatbed trucks, and they would move games from location to location to location to keep it fresh. So that's always been an issue. And then the promise of the internet was that it was going to eliminate that, and you could shift games digitally. That never happened. And now all of a sudden they've built this massive investment in fixed attractions that they can't move. And so they kind of did that to themselves.
Yeah. But we have this phenomenon now. Been there, done that.
Absolutely. And so getting into that too. And I think that this is why. So I don't know how much you follow the VR space, but there's a company called Sandbox VR, which recently raised $68 million in an A round from Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of the leading venture capital firms in the world. And one of the things that Andreessen loved about it is that they created this shareable mixed reality video that everybody gets at the end of the experience, and then they can share it. And they said VR is hard to understand what it is, so creating these mixed reality experiences was key to their ability to make it viral and to market it. And so, I think we're going to see more and more VR do that. But I also think there's an opportunity to build more, because, people still want to take pictures, and you can't take a picture of yourself in VR. I haven't seen anybody do that yet.
No, that's a real challenge.
And so the statistics, I'm just going to flip through these really quick. Let's do that, because there's some really, really good stuff here in the very beginning. So,
we in our research, there are basically 3 ways to examine out-of-home entertainment, for lack of a better term. We like to call the facilities community leisure venues versus FECs. Most of them are for families. But you can look at spending, you can look at participation, and you can look at time. So I've pulled a few of our charts just to show some of the trends that are occurring. This first one looks at entertainment spending. And as you can see, the digital realm is growing like crazy, where entertainment is basically flat.
And so what's that like? But it looks like it's been flat for a long time, right? And so
it's been flat for a long time.
But within that, there's got to be segments that are growing and segments that are shrinking, right? Really?
Not too much. Yeah, well, it's being diversified, because now you have acts growing, you have all these crazy other venues, which we'll get to, but that's becoming a big problem. You go to the next slide, and it just shows the percent of spending is actually shrinking a little for out of home. Incomes are going up, but the percent coming down. It's the digital world.
And I talk to a lot of operators who are finally realizing their biggest competitor is Netflix and Fortnite, not necessarily the place down the street.
Right. Yeah. The next slide will show you who's spending. And it's the bachelor degree and higher income households. That's your market. We've had a gentrification of out-of-home entertainment over the last decade. If you go back to 2000, that percentage was a lot less. One reason is we've lost the middle class, or a big chunk of the middle class. So you got to target this higher socioeconomic if you want to be successful. And they have much higher expectations and standards.
And that's the thing. I think, these kind of what I've branded luxury experiences, and that's why I think some of these really high-end VR experiences are doing so well.
Yeah. And, it's not necessarily the millennials that are the big spenders.
Yeah, but that's because the millennials are just coming into their earning years, right? And so,
Oh, yeah, right. But, we shouldn't forget about these other generations. I think Topgolf is a great example of a new venue that's being able to capture more of the older adult market that the traditional models
and do you know what their demographic breakdown looks like?
It skews older.
How much of that is because of the golf component, do you think? Okay.
Not that much. I mean, something like 30, 40%.
Actually, I talked to them. They said like 70+% of their people, quote, don't identify as golfers, whatever that means, right? Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like our social bowling venues. Sometimes people will go and they won't bowl or they won't golf. It's the social experience. They incorporate the food and beverage with it. They add a little bit of modern day stuff. Now let's look at time. The average American in 2000, we combined 2 years just to make sure it was accurate, spends a little over 5 hours a day in leisure. That hasn't hardly changed over 30 years. Okay. But when we look at attendance visiting arts and entertainment venues, on the average day, they only spend 6 minutes.
So in a month, so that would basically be one visit a month somewhere, roughly, right?
It's around 14.3 visits a year. If you back out movie attendance, which is about 3.4, it's a little less than one time a month.
And so then the question becomes, it's probably concentrated. You've got a whole bunch of people that do it very infrequently, and then a small group that probably skew that. Is there a long tail to that statistic that you've been able to see, or do you know?
It's not that long of a tail. No, it's really not that long of a tail. Yeah, I mean, you're looking at you got to look at the whole universe of all the things they can do. Food festivals, concerts, museums, pop-up.
So where does replayability come in then, right? I mean, if people are only doing this once a year or something like that, or like, how often do you need to look at refreshing your facility if the frequency of attendance is low and the competition is broad?
Well, quite honestly, you can't rely on fixed attractions anymore. You have to, if you look at the restaurant industry and how they drive attendance, is LTOs, limited time offerings. You got to do all kind of special events and concerts, and that's what drives it. FOMO. I
was here for the Sky Zone annual franchisee conference, and one of the franchisees was looking at a VR attraction, and he asked me, he says, "Can I move it around?" And I'm like, "Well, how frequently?" And he said, every month or two, because he's got 4 parks. And I'm like, yeah, of course you can. And he's like, because I don't know if I want to invest in one thing, but I could buy 4 and rotate them every quarter. And it's getting back to the old furniture moving business. Now, there should be a way to do that digitally without having to move infrastructure. But yeah, really interesting.
Right.
Good point.
Yeah. Next slide kind of shows you, who has the least amount of leisure time are the ones who are spending the most money, the college educated. So they're just trying to pack as many experiences as they can in. And with them, the time is more valuable than the money. am I wasting my time? They'll waste their money, but they don't want to waste.
And that's
their
where,
time.
and I think that's why these high-end experiences that are more expensive, that are peak experiences, which we'll talk about the what you call high fidelity. We'll talk about that a little bit. Are key, I think, to this industry for the next decade, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, this just looks at, this is an index of who goes out the most, who spends the most time. And it drops until people retire, then it starts going up again. But here's participation in any sort of out-of-home entertainment or art venue.
Yeah, interesting.
And it's going down. It's going down. We have less people going out. It's sort of getting back to that real broad statement. We've kind of lost the middle class. But this, and if you look at the amount of time, the bachelor and higher degree, they account for over half the time spent.
And there's a correlation between education and income, which is kind of what you're inferring here, right? Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's income and values too. And we just pulled up next slide. You can just look at some of the different attractions. Look at movies are down 26%. Bowling is down. Golf is down. Billiards. It goes on and on. The only thing we can find up recently are national parks for some reason.
And that's fascinating too, because they did just have like the 100th anniversary or something, and they actually had a substantial marketing budget promoting that. And I wonder if that's actually part of the reason. It'd be interesting to look at that.
Yeah. So the next one's the scary one.
Yeah. I love this slide. By the way, can I use this? Because one of the things I do is I talk about market segmentation with my clients, and I want them to understand that all of these segments have unique attributes and unique things that people might expect going there. And so finding the right attraction for each one of these little niche markets is actually difficult and important.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we take that once a month trip out on average, hey, why should I ever repeat anything when I have so many options I can share on social media? I mean, you got the breweries and we got mini golf and cocktails, and we got the axe throwing. I mean, what is
grocery-tainment?
Well, now the Whole Foods in Atlanta has added a rooftop entertainment area with a bar. And the retailers are doing it.
The big Omaha, the one in Omaha. Yeah.
You got Bass Pro with the bowling, because entertainment's dying. I mean, they're being eaten alive by e-commerce, so they're trying to figure out, how do I drive attendance?
You have laser tag centers here, and this one comes up a lot. And I know you've done a lot of research, and some of yours showed the average age of the player doing laser tag was way older than most people would think. And I've had a lot of operators push back and call bullshit on that. And I've been meaning to ask you this question for a long time, so I've got you here. What are you seeing in the laser tag trend? Because there is, there's some similarities between that and some of the high-end VR systems.
The successful ones are targeting the adults. If you want to be successful today, you can no longer target families. They're too small of a market. And back in the early days of family entertainment centers, we had a little bit of something for everyone. That was the theory. And there wasn't that much competition at work. But now we got so many specialized venues, especially for adults. There isn't an adult alive that wants to show up in a family entertainment center when they have choices like Top Golf and Dave & Buster's and all these other ones. And what's very interesting, when you look at the adult ones, ones without the
redemption games,
and,
which, by the way, Dave & Buster's clearly, I think, still fits into, but we can talk about that later.
They still get a big chunk of business from the family market, but they're not targeting them. It's the adults that spend the money.
And so Heather was asking, is there any relevance to the size of the words in this word cloud, or is that okay? Just checking. Yep.
No.
Yeah. Awesome.
Just to make it look pretty. So what's happening as the number of options grow, your leisure time becomes more valuable. Because you don't want to waste.
Because you want to do it all, right? Is that why? What's the driver for that?
Yeah. Well, you get more discriminating. because you don't want to waste your time. Because you do, if there's only one option, if it was a Ford with the Model T, you can have any color as long as it's black, okay. But suddenly you get all the colors. Now you want your choice, now you want what you want.
All right, so let's talk about the Fidelity Belly.
Yeah, okay. People make decisions based upon, and this kind of is really kind of looking at, do I stay home or do I leave home? And what we call convenience deals with the ease of access to time, money, and effort. And that's basically all the digital technology we have at home today. I mean, what's it cost you to watch a show on Netflix? A nickel, 10 cents based upon your subscription. And then what happens is, to get them out of the home, you got to have high fidelity. It's got to be better than what you can have at home. Some people are saying 10 to 20 times better. And over time, what happens is, maybe go to the next one. Over time, what happens is, as the convenience increases, the fidelity has to go up. At one time, we had these little round discs called CDs, and we played music on them, okay? And then out came the MP3 player, and the convenience went up, and the cost went up, cost went down. So as a result, for a concert, they had to raise the fidelity. It could no longer just be the music. It had to be the fireworks and the lighting and the fog and Lord knows what else. And
VIP experiences and custom tents and the whole thing.
Right. Oh yeah, crazy. So what happened is the musical CD fell into what we call the fidelity belly. You don't want to be there. People either go to one extreme or they go to the other. And the trouble today is a lot of venues, the older models, the older business models, are falling into the fidelity belly, and they don't even realize.
Interesting.
I mean, you can look at the movie theater industry, and as the convenience of watching movies at home increased and the cost went down, they had to keep raising the fidelity. I mean, they finally realized they're competing with the lounge chair at home. So what do? They rip out all the seats. They put in these luxurious electric leather lounge chairs. They start serving you food and beverage. And guess what? They lost 2/3 of their seating capacity.
This is the thing that drives me the most crazy about the VR industry and the VR market, is that there's the mindset of the operator. I still call it the quarter mindset, because I think for so long they made money a quarter at a time, selling 3-minute game increments with a continue feature, that they can't understand that people are willing to pay a lot of money for a great experience. And some of these VR experiences are truly amazing. They're mind-blowing. And especially in the early days, I really feel like a lot of these guys are underpricing these experiences. I went to a movie recently. I saw Endgame. I went to a luxury theater, and for 2 people, I spent $140 on seeing one movie.
Oh yeah. Well, look at what people spend.
I spent $300 last night to see the Foo Fighters.
They'll pay for the high fidelity use of their time. They either want great or they're going to stay home.
And this is why I think these cube-based VR arcades are ultimately going to struggle, is because it doesn't give them the social experience they want. It can be high fidelity, but not social. And it's got to be both of those, I think.
Yeah. And Bob, when we looked at the data, when you look at more of the middle class who have gone out less and less, but when we look at them, when they go out, they're going for the high fidelity. They're going out less and saving up to have the high fidelity experience. So as the convenience goes up, high fidelity has to go up, or
you don't want to be
fall
there
into the fidelity belly.
Yeah, and here you talk about like social entertainment space,
right? It's all about social. I mean, we're human beings. We evolved. We survived as a species.
You talked about, do you remember the original Foil conference at UCLA? And you gave a presentation about fire pits and how that, like, and I still remember that to this day. And I think that, like, what's the current version of that?
Well, that's why we still have candles at the dining table, because it reminds us of the fire pit. But yeah, we all used to sit around, many, many years ago around the outdoor fire, eating and drinking and telling stories and socializing, and you can do that at home. You can watch a movie at home and talk to the person next to you.
And I know that, and that's the thing that I'm doing some work in the theater industry, and I try to remind them that and that's why they call it a shared experience, not a social experience. When you go to CinemaCon and you hear all these presentations, they talk about the power of a shared experience, and I feel like that's spin.
Yeah, but if the movie theater's at a bar and people hang out at the bar afterwards and talk about the movie, just like at the VR venue, then you can, talk about it. But why go to a movie unless it's just over the top,
So what else do we have here?
Well, this is something that's driving a lot of consumers, and it's the conscientious consumer, it's social responsibility. This industry hasn't quite caught on, but people are now making a decision of what companies they do business with based upon, are they environmentally and socially responsible? And this is escalating like crazy. I mean, we have countries now declaring environmental emergencies. And the younger generation especially is really into this. And pretty soon this is going to start making a big difference on which of these out-of-home entertainment venues people go to. They're not going to.
So SeaWorld's already been paying the price for that, right? And I think the whole zoo industry is trying to figure that out, because if they don't see it coming, they're spending too much time in the ostrich exhibit with their heads in the sand. Yeah,
I mean, the next slide is a project we finished up last year out in the Seattle area. We're LEED certified. There were 3.4 miles of geothermal wells. Is farm and seat-at-table restaurant. I mean, it captures all these values. So, you look at the restaurant industry, you look at the entertainment, there's so many options. Am I going to support something? Am I going to support a business that reflects my values? So when I go there and share my experience, I'm also sharing who I am on social media.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to hang out with friends like you,
absolutely.
right?
And
this is same values.
And this is the thing that I think that when I talk about design research is understanding what the drivers are, and it's finding the innate values. And you can't necessarily even do that from surveys too. Like you have to be out there and you have to be talking to your customers, your prospects. You have to sit and spend an hour asking them why 100 times about all kinds of things to get to the real bottom of what their drivers are, because those are the values. And if you can connect with their values, then you can make a difference. And one of the nice things about, I think the VR experiences is there's so much variety out there and more coming that, you can have really transformational experiences. They're using this stuff to treat PTSD and depression and anxiety. And so if you can create virtual reality peak experiences or high fidelity experiences that can change someone's fear of flying or fear of spiders or remove phantom limb pain from an amputee, what else could you do to if you tapped into their values to entertain them in a way that really moves them and motivates them? I think that we haven't even scratched the surface on that yet.
But here's something to think about. Right now, most of the VR people are experiencing is out of home. It's sort of like the early game room arcades. But the technology is going to advance very fast in the home. So, is the out-of-home VR venue going to be able to compete in the future in-home? And the one shortcoming is, when are we going to get to the point we aren't watching avatars?
Well, and that's I think that's when VR in the home will actually be feasible as a social tool, and that's what people want. And so if I can have virtual telepresence that's believable, and I can sit in my living room around an ayahuasca circle with 13 other people in different locations, then there's no reason to leave the home. And you want to talk about cocooning to the next level. I'm actually, the book that I'm writing that'll release in 2020 is about this actual issue and how VR and the impact it's going to have on a whole bunch of industries, including things like travel and leisure and work and education and everything.
Yeah, I call it the digitalization of place, of physical place. I mean, think about it. You don't even have to leave your home today to be a criminal. We have cybercrime. You can order restaurants. You can attend college. I don't go to the bank anymore to deposit checks. A lot of it's just done electronically now. It's like Faith Popcorn says we're actually bunkering in our homes now.
Yeah, and if you guys aren't familiar, Faith Popcorn wrote a book like 10 or 15 years ago about this concept called cocooning. And she was way talking about a futurist that predicted the future. She was spot on in her predictions in that first book.
Oh yeah, she's one of
so
the
if you haven't followed her, you should follow her. Her name's Faith Popcorn, and you should definitely follow her. So what do you see? When you're talking to people who are thinking about getting into this business, into the community leisure entertainment business or whatever, like what are your top 3 things that you say to them to be aware of?
Well, first of all, I'm hoping they haven't been in the industry and aren't coming at it with any paradigms. Even new clients come with some paradigms, but they tend to be more open. One thing I say is very simple. If you don't have great food and beverage, you're not going to make it. And if you aren't in the restaurant industry, you do not want to start in the bottom of the learning curve. We work with a restaurant operator with about 30 restaurants, and we bring them in to run the food and beverage for all our clients. Because otherwise,
what kind of scale do you need to bring in a food and beverage operator? Like could somebody building a 10,000 square foot arcade or VR center with 5 to 7 different attractions, is that big enough, or does it have to be like?
Well, let me put it this way, and this is just general, but you need to do about $1 million in food and beverage. Because at that level, you can first of all have an on-site professional food and beverage manager, and then you can have another company overseeing the whole thing and monitoring, help you.
And how much square footage do you need generally to do $1 million in F&B? Would you say?
You could do it. It depends if it's more bar, which doesn't take as much, and if people are walking around with the
drinks. So it's not you don't need 5,000 square foot dedicated to F&B. You could do it in a couple of thousand. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a generalization because, if they're walking around with drinks everywhere, you don't have to have the same seating capacity as a dedicated space. But you definitely want beer and wine.
And you need craft beer and good wine. It can't just be like High Life and PBR. Right?
No. And we're doing wine on tap now. That's big because it's more environmentally responsible too, and it's easier to do it. And you can get all the premium wines that way. Same with the beer. But what's interesting is, I'll use the term millennials, they've shifted more to cocktails.
Craft cocktails is the thing. Absolutely. Yeah. And what's and as far as the cost, like if you're building a facility and you want to go in as small as feasible, because I know like a lot of people coming into this market are underfunded as it is, and that's something I warn them about, is like just save your money and do something else if you can't. Go big or go home is kind of one of the things that I say is like, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars do you need to budget to your food and beverage, component?
I mean, kitchen and bar equipment has gotten very expensive. I don't think you could do anything for much less than $300,000 or $400,000. So, because you got to build some flexibility into your kitchen because menu change. The beautiful thing about food is you can change your menu overnight. You can keep introducing new things. You can run LTOs. That's different than having a fixed attraction. Or games in the game room where it costs you $9,000 to buy a new one.
Well, one of the nice things about, and this is, in 1998, I did a presentation at Fun Expo, which you'll probably remember that show. And it was called X Arcade. And it was the concept of using windowing for arcade games to bring them into the out of home before they made it into the home market. And at Global VR, we were really close to that. We had EA and Activision really considering it, but I couldn't get the operators to be willing to do revenue share. They would literally spit on me. And it was going to require taking a percentage of the revenue and kicking it upstream. And then Golden Tee and TouchTunes and eCast and the jukebox companies made that more the norm. And now the interesting thing is they're open to revenue share, and we have a new technology paradigm coming into play with VR and PC-based gaming. And so it's possible that with these new developers that are getting their foothold in the location-based space first, because the consumer market hasn't evolved yet, that if we can sell them on that opportunity to stay in the out-of-home first and then port things into the home market, build your audience, I think we can have multiple revenue streams. I think it's time for that concept to rear its head again.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than what retail's doing. They got the brick and mortar and they got the e-commerce site, and they're finding they got to be on the.
So what about food trucks? So this is something I've talked about. Some cities have really vibrant food truck. Portland, for example, amazing. New York, amazing. Is there a way? Have you seen anybody integrate food trucks successfully into an entertainment facility?
There's a big shuffleboard facility, for example, up in Chicago, and they designed it where they drive in different food trucks. And
is it working? Is it? Do you know?
I don't know. It kind of limits your options, because each food truck.
Yeah, so you'd have to have. But if you had a couple of bays and you could rotate that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The one downfall of that is one of the things people can't do at home is do big groups. And group business is, it can be a third of your revenue.
Actually, I've talked to hundreds of owners of these VR places, and one of the common things across every successful one is 30 to 40% of their business is group sales.
Yeah, and so the bottom line is your food quality is going to impact that decision, and you really need to do it in-house.
All right, so that was one thing, food and beverage. What's the second thing? The three things that you tell people to be aware of, like when they're coming into the business.
Well, they're not the customer. We did that one. Food and beverage, and I would say it's very simple. You got to go to the high fidelity route. But don't make it too complicated. You don't want to have 50 different attractions. Stay focused. Decide which niche market you're going after, and you got to look at the whole marketplace. But then also realize you're going to have new competition in the future you don't even know about. So you got to design for that. But you got to design flexibility.
And you have to continually reposition yourself based on what your competition is doing. And you need to do that on a quarterly basis. And so when you talk about know the customer and you're not the customer, who do you target now? Like you've talked about, so they have to be highly educated, relatively affluent. You're saying that just to summarize, there's a market in the older, the Gen X and boomers are still a vibrant market and are still spending money. What other insights or underserved markets are you seeing out there where you might direct somebody?
Well, I mean, we're doing a lot with what I call the interactive social games. Bowling is one. Ping pong is one. There's a whole shuffleboard. The thing that people can do that facilitates socialization. I mean, we have a facility here in Kansas City, Chicken and Pickle. It's pickleball. People don't realize, it's not difficult like tennis. It's more like ping pong on steroids, but it's highly approachable. People are looking for that human face-to-face social experience out of the home. So you want to design around facilitating that, because that'll never change. I mean, that's in our genes.
Yeah, those are values. Values don't shift very quickly, right? I mean,
No. Yeah, and there's nothing richer than the true physical face-to-face interaction. You see the hands, our voices, I forget, 25% of our communication, our hands, our eyes, and everything else for the rest of it.
Heather just said she went to a silent disco, and I did one of those at Coachella one year where you just, you put on headphones and you're all listening, but as a spectator, it's weird, but you're all like listening to music. Heather, was that all different music, or were you all listening to the same thing? I'm curious, because the one that I did, everybody was listening. It was like radio broadcast. Everybody was listening to the same thing. But in this case, everybody's listening to their own music, which is really interesting, and just dancing together because they want to be together. Yeah, fascinating. Awesome. What's the most interesting project you're seeing out there right now, whether you're working on it or not? Like, what's the thing that's captured your imagination?
Well, we have one that's going to be a restaurant social venue with a lot of these different games in it, including even pickleball indoors and outdoors and bowling and so forth. I'm working on one that's Route 66 themed, but you have to realize people that used to travel Route 66, they got to be 45 or older. So we're trying to do this retro quiche kind of whimsical take on it at a major tourist attraction. And it's going to be cocktails and miniature golf, and we're going to have bowling.
So,
and we're going to have
so that brings up a good one. Intellectual property. There's a lot of people believe that the only way to be successful is to license major intellectual property for these entertainment centers. What's your take on that?
I think that's one route, but you're not limited to that.
Yeah.
You're definitely not limited to that. I mean, it's interesting right now. The popularity of independent restaurants is going up, where the popularity of the chains is going down because of uniqueness. And, local and all these other values come into play of what people are looking for.
Though Avengers Endgame just did like $2.4 billion in 3 weeks or something like that in revenue, right? And so people do still associate with stories. Like, I don't think that's a brand. I think that's actually about stories and resonating with story more than it is a brand.
A true brand is a story. If you don't have a story, you don't have a brand.
Yeah. So cool. Any so how do people follow you? What's the best way to follow you to get, because you're like a fire hose of this amazing information and insights, and I see it and I'm like, oh my God, I share what I can, but I can't even keep up with it all. So
well, you can go to our website. I try to do a newsletter once a month. Sometimes it's every other month, and you can sign up on our website. I have a blog where I sometimes comment more personally about things if I'm going to offend somebody versus in the newsletter. And I tweet and post on LinkedIn about 5 times a day of interesting things I've seen.
So what's your Twitter handle?
I gotta go look it up. I think it's Randy White. Let me see. Or it's White
I'm going to put up a
Hutchinson.
link to the blog here in a second. I'm just pulling that up.
Yeah, and you can sign up for the newsletter. That's separate.
Where is the blog? Click here to subscribe to our monthly newsletter. Here. So go ahead and everybody should click on this to log into Randy's. There's no spam. It's like at all. It's like it's pure data and information.
And it's usually like 6 to 7. Oh, the blog, yeah, and then above that.
Yeah, that's what I put for the newsletter, and then the blog I have to find. By the way, I'm struggling to find the blog on your homepage. So
it's not on the. Just tap one of the things like location-based leisure.
Yep.
Right menu.
Top right, Randy White's blog. Menu. There it is.
And then
there's so much information on your website. It's you can get lost in there.
I think there's like.
Yeah, I know. So that's the blog. That's the link to the blog, and then we'll find your Twitter. Randy White Twitter.
Yeah, I'm looking now. I never can remember. I just tweet.
That would be a great Twitter handle. I wonder who has that. It's at White Hutchinson. I got it here. So here's a link. Yeah, here's a link to Randy's Twitter feed, and I'll put all these in the notes on the YouTube replay video. So please make sure to share this one. Randy, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and both preparing all that material and everything you do for the industry. Like you're doing really important work, and I hope you realize that and you recognize how much I and everybody else I think appreciates it, even if it doesn't get said. So
thank you so much, Bob, for the opportunity to appear and share some of this
information. And this is important stuff, guys. So I'd ask every one of you to share this one. If you haven't shared the others, this is one that I think this can help entrepreneurs that are thinking about getting in this industry understand what they're getting into and what they need to do to be successful. It's just not. There's too many people entering this from a perspective of fan and hobby. Like they're hobbyist enthusiasts, and they're coming in undercapitalized, and they're going to lose their life savings.
This is an incredibly
Yeah.
complicated industry. Think about it. You're in the entertainment industry, you're in the food and beverage industry, and you're in the catering industry. Any one of those is an industry. By the way, I'm going to add a fourth point to my advice. Forget the paradigms. Forget the paradigm business.
Come in with a beginner's mind. We're going to do. I'm going to do a webinar outside of this, or maybe I'll bring Kylie in, and we're going to talk about mindsets. Because I think understanding your mindset coming into a project like this is absolutely critical, and operating it on an ongoing basis, talking to customers, etc. So,
yeah, you got to be like a Martian just landing, and you're like an anthropologist trying to figure out what to do.
Awesome, Randy. I love you. I love your work. Thank you so much for taking time, and we'll see you. I'll see you at some conference somewhere, I'm sure. And let's hook up at certainly at IAPA. Maybe grab a cup of coffee or a beer or something. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.
Thank you again, Bob.